Also, check this out. This is why the toy store hired me, a yo-yo. Hey folks, so this last weekend I did an AMA for the Bluegrass Guitar Facebook group. If you don't know what an AMA is, it's an Ask Me Anything. It's basically like a crowdsourced interview where everyone gets to hop on, they ask questions, and I give answers. I posted about this in my YouTube community tab, so if you didn't see that, now you know where to look to get updates like that. I thought I'd go through this and recap it a little bit, maybe continue the conversation a little bit, because I know that some of you don't have Facebook accounts, or some of you missed it, or whatever happened, so let's do it now. Let's hang out.
Take a spin, now you're in with the techno set. You're going surfing on the internet.
All right, so here's Alan's intro for me. He says Marcel's a lot like Ariana Grande, except he's got about 41 million fewer YouTube subscribers. You know, Alan, you're not wrong. Thank you for saying all those nice things. I appreciate the backwards hat comment. Anyway, let's get into some of these questions. So Dan here asked, Marcel, this might be a difficult one, but what has been your favorite solo to teach? That's a great question. I gave a silly answer here, of course. And I said the hot dog video where I'm wearing the hot dog costume and I'm teaching minor swing off of the album Hot Dog. All right, I'll put on the stupid hot dog costume. Could you guys zip me up real quick? Oh God. I don't know, maybe some people will be mad for me saying this, but I think some of the Tony Rice solos definitely run together. One of my favorite Tony Rice breaks, I don't think I've made a video on yet, and that's the Streets of London break. I did do a video on John Wilkes Booth and Orphan Annie. I think those are really good examples of this more gentle side to Tony Rice that I wish we got to see more of, because I think that sound is super, super cool. Jeff says, how much time do you spend playing these days? How does that compare to other phases of your growth as a guitarist? I've been teaching guitar full time, making YouTube videos, doing all these things. So I have a guitar in my hands most of the time. Honestly, it's been like that for a long time. Even the job that I had before I could go full time with this, I worked at a toy store and I was the assistant buyer, so I would help place orders. And we may have ordered some child-sized guitars so I could play guitar at work when no one was looking, or even when people were looking. Also, check this out. This is why the toy store hired me, a yo-yo. And this video is going in a weird place. I can't believe I snuck in a yo-yo demo. Carl says, hello Marcel, thank you for sharing your knowledge here and on your channel. What would be your most important point that you apply personally when it comes to practice in general? Thank you. So I told Carl that you should count. I see this all the time with new students. New students really struggle to play things in time. And sometimes that has to do with them trying to just feel time. They just want to feel when things are in time, when things are right. There's nothing wrong with trying to use your intuitive sense of time, but just learning how to count is a really nice shortcut. It's kind of like if you wanted to know how to spell something correctly, you could guess until you find the right spelling, or you could just look it up and find the right spelling right away. Both skills are actually really, really valuable. It's really good to be able to read rhythms and understand how rhythms work. It's also really valuable to be able to do things by feel. And just because you do one skill or the other skill doesn't mean that you can't also learn the other. I used to take drum lessons from this guy named Mel Zelnick, who lived kind of in the middle of the desert. My family would drive, so I could have my drum lesson every Sunday. He would always ask us to stay for dinner. He had this really cool Cajun meatloaf he would make. One time we're sitting around the table and I was drumming. I was drumming on my legs and I was tapping my feet. And I was playing the drum part to Throw Away Your Television by Red Hot Chili Peppers. The drum part goes like this. Something like that, if I remember correctly. Mel, he kind of snapped at me. He said, you know, if you're going to play it in time. And it was so brutal. We all just kind of laughed it off, but it was a very funny moment. He made me realize that thinking that I have it close enough isn't enough. It should be in time. It should be correct. All right, Josh says, hey man, love your work. I've been trying to get that dust in a baggy solo to speed for about 3 weeks, lol. I've gotten where I can play consistently at about 92%, and on good days I can get it at full speed. When you get a lead break like this, learned and worked up to speed, do you keep that in your arsenal, or do you just keep some of what you learned and apply it to your own solo strategies? I'm finding that is a big challenge to get things up to speed, but as soon as that happens, I will retain some of the solo and just kind of do my own thing. Yada, yada, yada. Thank you. Great lesson. Wonderful, man. I really don't play breaks how I've learned them. The reason why is I look at it as Billy Strings is an improviser. I'm an improviser. Billy Strings is never going to play the break the same way over and over again, so I'm never going to play the same break over and over again. Think about some of these other breaks. Every single time Tony Rice plays Church Street Blues or Old Train, which are the examples I gave in my comment, he does play those breaks note for note. So maybe when you play them, you should play them note for note. Some things are special. Sometimes people do care about things. So look at the break. Look at Billy String's strategies, specifically what kinds of phrases he plays over what kinds of chords, and maybe you can start changing some of those details. Now, a really good way to do this is to take a small phrase and try to make a derivative version. You can get into it the same way and you can get out of it the same way, but some of the details in the middle might be just slightly different. Maybe you change one note, maybe you change two notes. The variations don't have to be huge. In fact, a lot of times we don't even want them to be huge. They just have to be successful. And when you're starting out, creating successful variations is more important than creating cool variations. It's kind of like you need to just complete the thing before you can complete the thing well. So think about that when you learn these breaks. Chris says, do you have an underrated and or obscure tune you think should get more attention from bluegrass guitar pickers? I said I think bluegrass could use a little more of this, and let's just play that.
You better pray to the Lord when you see those flying saucers. It may be the coming of the judgment day. It's a sign there's no doubt of the trouble that's about. So I say, my friend, you'd better start to pray.
Whatever happened to that good old traditional bluegrass? Alan says, is there really anyone who can sight read tabs and just play them, or does everyone have to work through them and build speed? It's a good question, Alan. Oh, excuse me. Alan actually says he's asking for a friend. Sight reading is its own skill. It's something that needs to be practiced on its own. And there's certain gigs, there's certain applications that really require good sight readers. I did a lot of years playing in the pit for musicals. Basically, you get 2 books most of the time for Act 1 and Act 2. They probably have about 40 pieces of music in them for scene transitions and actual songs. A lot of times there's all of this underscoring that we have to play too, and that's about 80 pieces of music. And if, like I said, if it's a musical, those are long pieces as well. They have key changes, they're complicated. There's no way you're going to memorize all of them. So every single night you kind of sight read through the whole books. Maybe you make big notes or you learn particularly hard passages, but it might not be worth memorizing the entire thing. Anyway, my point is, I think I'm a pretty good sight reader. How much does that benefit me on the daily? Sometimes I'm in situations where I do have to read things quickly, and it helps that I can, but it's not that great of a skill, I guess is what I'm saying to you. Almost like people always talk about perfect pitch and how perfect pitch is, such a cool thing, and you got to have perfect pitch, you'll be a better musician. When you think about it, how valuable is perfect pitch on the regular? There's probably some moments, like for instance, if you're transcribing and you had perfect pitch, I'm sure that would be really valuable. But if you're improvising, perfect pitch probably doesn't help you, because improvising is still based on the quality of your ideas, on the execution of your ideas. So not useful. Similarly, sight reading something quickly doesn't mean I memorize something quickly. So there you go. This one's from Adam. Adam says, hey Marcel, really enjoy all your videos. I appreciate the amount of time you spend on the theory side of what makes a tune or melody work. In that same vein, how do you toe the line between theory and feeling? I think it's easy to get lost in the theory, but it's also why the music works and vice versa. Honestly, this is kind of a similar question. Music theory is descriptive. When we find something we like, we can describe it with music theory. Sometimes it is kind of a shortcut. So if I want a specific kind of sound, I may be able to identify that as Phrygian or Phrygian dominant or Lydian, or, as a minor pentatonic scale in a bluesy situation or whatever. Sometimes I can just use a little bit of theory to give me a jump start. But at the end of the day, whatever I make after thinking through that theory, whatever I make is still on me. It's my responsibility to make something good. The theory doesn't create anything. The theory isn't music on its own. It's just descriptive. It's descriptions. I think some people think that if you learn a lot of theory, your music will become drier because suddenly, you're so analytical and that's the way you have to think, but that's just not true. I think sometimes people end up making drier music when they learn a lot of music theory just because they're trying to apply everything that they know. And that's an interesting, fun, creative pursuit for them. The same way you might learn a new Tony Rice lick or something and you might want to apply it at the jam right away. But honestly, as someone who's studied improvising and music theory, I don't think knowledge about any of those things hinders my ability to make music. Think of it this way. If you have any friends that are good singers, I'm sure you've heard them sing terribly. Right? You can be in the car with someone who's a fantastic singer and they can just be belting something out in the worst, most terrible way because they're just not thinking about it. And it's the same with music theory. You can just stop thinking about it. You can just make music again like you used to. All right, I'm just going to read out a couple more. There is actually a lot more in the full AMA, and you can check that out on the Bluegrass Guitar Facebook group. I highly suggest that you join. It's a lot of fun. But anyway, Roger says, I notice you wear hearing aids. Is your hearing impaired in both ears? I have a hearing loss, but so far have put off hearing aids. Unreal how good you are and blessed to still share your gift with the world. Stay well. It's a good question. I do wear hearing aids. So I wear hearing aids in both ears. I've worn hearing aids since I was 6 years old. I have a genetic disorder called otosclerosis, and my father has it too. It runs in the family. We essentially have two bones in our ear that don't touch, and so the signals, the audio waveforms, if you will, don't transfer very well over that gap. In our case, it means we have low frequency hearing losses, so we struggle to hear certain things. Personally, I struggle to hear the upright bass a lot. When I play live, you'll notice me looking at mandolin players. I want to see their hands because if I can see the chop, that means I can stay in time. And a lot of times in live sound scenarios, it might sort of overpower the hearing aid. Some hearing aids are set to sort of shut down so you don't get any damaging amplification through them, which can be a real struggle too. It's one of the reasons I don't like gigging a whole lot. It creates a lot of sort of difficult scenarios, and I get a lot more fulfillment from teaching, so here I am. By the way, I don't want to see any comments out there. I don't want to see a single one of you that's like, man, Marcel's so good even though he's deaf. None of that. Number one, part of hearing, not deaf. Number two, this is why I didn't bring it up. Brandon says, what was your motivation to lean towards bluegrass music? And this is a fun question. My family, we had a farm in South Phoenix. And I spent a lot of my childhood on that farm. We had like chickens, we had some sheep. My parents grew a lot of flowers. They had their own business that they run. And we would just hang out on these acres of land and we would pick oranges and run around and play soccer and catch lizards. And I really enjoyed that sort of farm experience, even if it is sort of an Arizona farm experience. And as my father got more successful with his business, he ended up managing bigger plants sort of up and down the West Coast. And we kind of transitioned into more of a city life slowly. Yeah, I always really missed sort of those earlier places that we lived in my childhood. I really liked that lifestyle. So when I found bluegrass, when I started listening to this music, I identified with a lot of the themes. A lot of it has to do with returning to the farm after leaving. You know, I'm on my way back to the old home. Why did I leave my plow in the field? All of those kinds of lyrics aren't about people that currently live on the farm. They're people that want to return to the farm. I really just wanted to sing the songs and interact with a community that felt the same way that I did. Eventually, I realized that improvisation was an important part of that, and I started practicing guitar. Anyway, I hope that this has been fun for all of you. You know what to do, like, comment, subscribe, blah, 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 blah. YouTube is a bunch of fun. Please go check out the Bluegrass Guitar group on Facebook. I think you'll really enjoy it if you're not already a member. And I'll see you next week for another video. See y'all later.